Over 60? Discover the 4 shocking nuts to avoid and the 4 amazing nuts that transform your health. Jean sat at her kitchen table, the glow of her tablet illuminating her tired face as she scrolled through the blog that screamed at her from the screen. Anxiety gripped her chest. The words shocking and transform echoed in her mind, amplifying the doubts she'd been wrestling with since Harold's passing. At 62, the reality of her health loomed like a dark cloud, especially after the doctor's recent visit when she learned her cholesterol was alarmingly high. The diagnosis shattered any remnants of calm she thought she had collected. How could she possibly face this? Alone? The garden flourished outside, filled with vibrant blooms that deserved better than her distracted care. She had poured her heart into the petals, nurturing the living symbols of her late husband's love. Yet here she was filling her days with flowers while her own well-being wilted. The irony twisted deep within her. She had survived the grief, but now this? Suddenly, tending to her health transformed from an abstract concept into looming reality. Sifting through the blog's whimsical promises, Jean felt a flicker of hope. 4 amazing nuts that could rock her world? Were pistachios really the answer to her struggles? But a voice in her head whispered skepticism. Could something as simple as nuts truly impact her life? What if they didn't? The tension wrapped around her, leaving her breath quick and shallow. The words on the screen became indistinct shapes as she tried to recalibrate her thoughts, battling the frustration that mingled with desire. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The kitchen held memories her daughter, Emily, had hovered around this very table years ago, and now Jean could almost hear her objections to this newfound obsession. Would she view it as yet another burden? Would she care enough to understand Jean's fears? Caution wrapped around her thoughts as she contemplated inviting Emily over to share this journey. What if Emily dismissed her? Would her daughter see her focus on nuts as a desperate attempt to reclaim a life that felt stolen? The pressure mounted as the idea turned from thrilling revelation to source of unease. Each time Jean caught her reflection in the cereal-splattered kitchen window, regret peeled away layers of resolve. Here she stood, the woman who loved fiercely but felt wrongly underestimated, an afterthought in a family history punctuated by her late husband's shadow and her own perceived age. Then came the moments of realization that tormented her, the weight of each worry, brewing emotional storms she had no power to quell. Yet here she was, throwing recipes together in a burst of determination. Could she craft a new legacy, a new connection with Emily through nuts? Yet as she looked beyond the steam rising from the stovetop, she couldn't ignore the doubt gnawing in her gut. The kitchen felt like a battleground, and with every chop of the knife, she understood, every day was a fight not just for energy, but for the very connection she craved with her daughter. What if her attempts failed, exposing the fissures between their worlds? Jean lingered at the stove, heart heavy and heart racing, realizing she had to confront the revelation that lay in wait, the idea of healthy living not merely as a personal venture, but a series of shared experiences fraught with tension, vulnerability, and the aching need to redefine their relationship. As the aroma filled the air, so did the uncertainty. This delicious promise might just lead them toward something profound, or pull them further apart than ever. The hesitation in her heart echoed loudly. Could this journey become a bridge, or would it crack under the weight of sorrow, loss, and fear? Jean's hands paused mid-chop, the knife hovering over the cutting board. The warm scent of garlic and onions mingled with hesitation, igniting a familiar battle within her. Could she really approach this situation with Emily? The closer she leaned to the idea of sharing her newfound passion for health, the heavier the gnawing doubt became. Yet, she couldn't ignore that glimmer of hope pulsing steadily beneath her anxiety. With uncertainty swirling in her chest, Jean envisioned images of her daughter, bright-eyed and optimistic in the past. At one point, Emily had looked up to her, had even embraced some of her eccentric hobbies. But time had created distance, and now, how would she even begin to breach the gap? Would admitting vulnerability endear her to Emily or push her further away? These conflicting thoughts swirled in a dizzying dance, keeping her rooted in place. With a deep breath, she steadied herself. Reaching for her phone, she stared at the contact for Emily. It felt like an unyielding obstacle, but she also recognized it was a lifeline. Perhaps if she shared her experience, it could forge a bond anew. She began typing, but each keystroke echoed the growing inadequacy swirling in her mind. "Hey, Emily, want to come over? I'm trying some new recipes." Was that enough to convey her true intention? Or would it merely come across as trivial? A sudden impulse struck her, prompting Jean to erase her draft and start anew. This time, she poured more of herself into the message. "I've been thinking about us, about health and sharing moments together. I want to cook something special. How does that sound?" She hesitated before hitting send, wondering if she was unintentionally revealing too much. Yet, wasn't vulnerability necessary to bridge the gap? As the phone vibrated with a reply, Jean felt a jolt of electricity surge through her. "Sounds great. What are we making?" A rush of exhilaration swept away her fears, albeit momentarily this could be it. She sensed it in the air, her anxiety dimmed. Jean resolved to channel her energies into preparing the best meal she could muster. Her heart raced as she envisioned an immersive culinary experience where they could cultivate not just health, but connection. Yet, amid this thrill, another wave of apprehension crashed over her. What if her attempt to incorporate the 4 amazing nuts didn't land as she'd hoped? The thought of Emily turning her nose up at her choices felt daunting. Would her daughter consider the nuts ridiculous, dismissing them like so many other fads she'd encountered? Jean grabbed her tablet again. She scrolled through health blogs and recipes with frantic determination, scouring for dishes that would showcase the nuts' potential. Beautifully plated salads, creamy sauces packed with flavor, a vibrant nut-based dessert. She felt an inkling of readiness. Could she turn her anxiety into creativity? This became not only about health. This was her opportunity for shared growth. The next morning, as she prepared the ingredients, the dishes transforming beneath her hands began to symbolize more than just a meal. They represented a freshly tilled field, unexplored yet promising. A prospect for laughter, learning, and perhaps reconciliation. With every passing moment in her kitchen, she wove dreams into the meals, envisioning the atmosphere filled with warmth and ease. Yet, even as she stirred sauce in her favorite pot, tiny whispers of doubt began to creep in. Would Emily embrace this new and passionate version of her mother? By the time Emily arrived, Jean had orchestrated her kitchen to feel welcoming, but the details felt overwhelming. Each decoration, every measured spice, seemed to amplify her insecurities. Would this successful endeavor breathe life back into their relationship, or expose the fractures that had developed with time? As the door creaked open and Emily stepped inside, Jean's heart lurched with a mix of hope and dread. Would this be their moment of truth, where every chop and simmer echoed the same desire for connection? Or would it merely highlight the differences between their worlds, unraveling the tenuous thread she crafted that day? The tension was palpable. The moment had come, and with it, the realization that the road ahead could lead to either heartening connection or bitter disappointment. Jean's heart raced as she turned toward the entrance, her thoughts in a whirlwind of anticipation mixed with dread. Flowers adorned the table, vibrant and inviting, yet they mocked her own uncertainty. Would this simple meal be enough to bridge the chasm that had widened over the years? Emily stepped inside, a fresh presence that instantly lit up the room. The initial enthusiasm in her daughter's voice caused Jean to cling onto that flicker of hope. "Wow, Mom, it smells amazing in here. What are we making?" Jean managed a smile, yet it felt fragile, like a soap bubble suspended on the cusp of bursting. "I thought we could try some exciting recipes with nuts," she replied, her voice steadying. "Well, let us see what you've got." Emily's playful tone paved the way for Jean to fostering connection. Still, as Emily scrutinized the ingredients, Jean couldn't shake the vulnerability that seeped in, expanding with every glance. What if Emily dismissed her ideas, reducing them to mere fad diets? As they cooked side by side, Jean carefully navigated the conversation, testing the waters of Emily's interest. These 4 nuts I found are packed with nutrients. They're said to boost brain health. What do you think about that? Emily raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism shimmering in her gaze. So, you're into this whole health thing now? That's new. The comment stung, but Jean fought to pivot the dialogue. I'm just trying to understand it better, you know? Maybe even share something meaningful. She inserted an uncharacteristic vulnerability into her tone, which seemed to surprise them both. Imagining the mutual curiosity igniting between them, Jean pressed on. Remember the time we made that disastrous recipe together? I thought I'd escape my comfort zone and try something new. A soft laugh escaped Emily's lips. That was a mess. That small shared moment felt transformative. The laughter created a patch, momentarily alleviating the tension. Jean seized it, pushing past her discomfort. What if we use this opportunity to explore what healthy means together? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Emily's posture softened slightly, and Jean's heart beat faster with the shifting energy. Yet, as they mixed ingredients and filled the kitchen with the aromatic undertones of their cooking, Jean couldn't ignore the ground beneath her feet felt precarious. Despite the growing warmth in their conversation, doubts swirled within Jean again. Would Emily see her mother as more than a figure from the past? As they molded the dough for a nut-based dessert, Jean contemplated the implications of addressing their scattered moments of the past. "Mom, I appreciate you reaching out," Emily said, breaking through Jean's internal turmoil. "But why now?" "Because I've realized I've been in my own little world for too long. I don't want you to feel like you can't talk to me," Jean offered. Each word etched her desire to renew their bond. However, she also felt a tug of fear. Was she exposing her vulnerability only to be met with rejection? The bedrock of her newfound passion felt overwhelming at that moment. It became glaringly apparent that while cooking together created a facade of normalcy, deeper questions lingered beneath the surface. "Okay, I see you trying," Emily replied cautiously, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "But what if this is just a phase? What if you get into the next thing and drop this idea too?" Jean paused, grappling with her daughter's perceptive insight. The words beckoned her to introspection. Was she truly ready to embrace change not just for herself, but for re-establishing their relationship? Then, as the dessert finished baking and the warm aroma wafted through the air, Jean looked Emily in the eye, and an idea sparked within her. What if we make this a regular thing? A way for us to explore both cooking and our lives together? Emily's brows knitted together, clearly pondering the proposal. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of opportunity and fear. Would this be the catalyst for deeper reconnection, or merely another meal shared with a lingering distance? The moment teetered on a precipice, a compelling point where they could either plunge deeper into vulnerability or retreat into silence, both reluctant to be the first to fall. As Jean took a deep breath, she realized that it was not only about finding common ground through meals. It was also about resurrecting the relationship that had long needed nourishment. And the desire for that change pulled at her resolve to take real action. But would it be enough to salvage their connection, or would time and misunderstandings continue to wear them thin? The potential for discovery lingered palpably in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. The stillness hovered, charged with the weight of unspoken concerns lingering in the air. Jean's heart thudded in her chest, each beat echoing the crucial nature of the moment. She sensed that this was more than a culinary experiment. It was a delicate attempt at peace, a tentative tether she was placing between herself and Emily. "Mom," Emily said finally, her tone taking on a seriousness that sent a shiver down Jean's spine. "I don't want to get my hopes up. Sometimes change feels like a word without substance." Jean's mind raced. Emily's skepticism was a mirror to her own doubts. Hadn't she waded into yet another self-imposed resolution, one destined to be abandoned? The fear of failing in this second chance was gnawing at her conscience. "I understand," Jean said softly, offering what she hoped was genuine reassurance. "But I can assure you, this feels different. I want to invest in us, in our connection. I want to make this space for us to learn together, even if it means confronting difficult truths." The truth hung above her, palpable and unsettling. Jean had spent so much time narrowing her focus on superficial achievements, on the things that wrapped her like a comforting cocoon, but ultimately isolated her work, health goals, hobbies. It had only served to erode the relationship she held dear. Emily studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing the sincerity in her mother's eyes. "Okay," she murmured. "I could think about that." With this small opening, Jean seized on the moment, her resolve sharpening. "How about we make a plan? Let us commit to this as if it's a project, an exploration. We can choose a new recipe every week, something out of our comfort zones. And we talk about everything: food, life, whatever comes up." Emily nodded slowly, a flicker of encouragement igniting within her glance. The warmth of the oven filled the room, but the real heat came from the exchange of vulnerability and possibility shared between them. They weren't just cooking, they were laying the groundwork for a new understanding. As icing was drizzled atop the cooling dessert, the conversation drifted back and forth, weaving in practical matters and personal anecdotes about food and health, fears and aspirations alike. But as they moved together in this shared space, Jean also confronted her personal narrative, recognizing that her hesitations reflected deeply ingrained patterns to retreat in times of conflict. In sharing her evolving perspective around health and the cooking they were doing, Jean also uncovered her passion for wellness that might serve as a bridge. But how to hold that space while cultivating curiosity and acceptance was a challenge she had to face. "Listen, I've learned something," she said, biting her lip as she deliberated the words. "Being healthy isn't just about what we eat, it's about how we feel too. I thought if I chased after these goals, it would bring me satisfaction. But I realize now, it's the connections we cultivate that define our lives." The depth of her admission hung tantalizingly in the air. As if reacting to an invisible thread of tension pulling on the words, Emily's expression shifted from uncertainty to contemplation. Jean noted the intensity in her daughter's gaze, the flicker of comprehension as Emily began to weave personal strands from her own life into this evolving dialogue. "Mom, I guess I've been so caught up in my own expectations, I forgot about how to share my thoughts with you," Emily admitted, her voice soft but firm. "What if this helps us both, if it's more than just cooking?" The prospect of mutual healing and perhaps a genuine connection unfurled before Jean, creating a pathway laden with potential. Yet, deep within her, the gnawing anxiety of whether they could maintain this momentum pulsed insistently. Just as they finished, the buzzer of the kitchen timer alerted them that the dessert was poised to be devoured. But there was another urgency simmering just below the surface, teasing at the edges of their comfort. "Next week, let us explore something unusual," Jean suggested, adrenaline surging through her. "Two ingredients we've never worked with before, what do you think?" Emily's eyes sparkled slightly, but the weight of expectation still surrounded them both. "Okay, but only if you promise to show me your real self, the messy and imperfect version too." Jean swallowed, realizing that this was more than a request for transparency. It was a call to embrace imperfection, not just in cooking, but in their evolving relationship. They both hovered at the brink of profound, uncharted territory, each heartbeat a reminder of the possibilities that lay before them. What would it take to truly reveal those messy depths, to break the walls that had separated them all these years? Would the next week crystallize this fragile thread into a sturdy bond, reaffirmed by vulnerability, or might it unravel all the careful stitching and hope they were beginning to weave? With this tension dancing between them, Jean could almost taste the uncertainty of shared futures ahead. Jean woke early the next morning, the remnants of last night's conversation echoing in her mind. The low light of dawn spilled into the kitchen, and she found herself standing before the empty countertop, the stillness a perfect metaphor for the uncertainty that lingered between her and Emily. There was comfort in the familiar space filled with scattered cookbooks, jars of spices, and her favorite apron hanging by the stove. Yet, this morning, it felt charged with potential, a blank canvas in need of exploration. She brewing a pot of coffee, the rich aroma pulling her thoughts into focus and reaffirming her commitment to the upcoming week. But was she prepared to face her vulnerabilities? Could cooking get them past the barriers they had built over the years? As the coffee dripped, she reached for her journal, an impulsive decision fueled by an urgency to document her intentions. What had been a simple record of recipes and health advice transformed into a ledger of her evolving mindset. She scribbled down her plan for the week, focusing on not just the ingredients, but what they represented a new recipe for a new relationship. Face the truth, she dictated to herself, aware that battling her own insecurities was part of this journey. She considered Emily's request to show her the messy and imperfect version. That alone felt daunting. Jean had felt the need to project an image of control and order for so long, a shield against disappointment. It was that mask she would have to peel back. With each word she wrote, the tension she felt with Emily morphed into a fiery determination to reshape how they communicated. Her pen moved, detailing not only cooking plans, but also a blueprint for emotional openness. Be transparent, she tapped down, share your fears. Let her see you. She closed her journal, a primitive promise to explore not just the culinary landscape, but the inner complexity that cooking together might unlock. That week, they would tackle unfamiliar ingredients as a metaphor for breaking new ground in their relationship. Could the act of exploration in the kitchen bloom into a broader understanding in life? Jean glanced at her phone, a twinge of anxiety fluttering in her stomach. Reaching out to Emily felt necessary, yet frightening. Would texting her an invitation to discuss their plan make her seem desperate for connection? Still, the urge to step out of her comfort zone overpowered her hesitation. She tapped out a message, her fingers trembling slightly. Hey, ready to pick out those 2 ingredients we've never used? After sending the text, she busied herself in the kitchen. The morning menus inspired her to experiment with flavor pairings she had previously shied away from. What if she treated this week as a culinary challenge? One where both she and Emily could embrace failure as part of the learning process. As she mixed together a new breakfast scramble, Jean could almost visualize Emily grinning at her efforts, teasing her for the creative chaos. What if she encouraged laughter rather than perfection? This thought spurred a wave of lightness within her. Laughter, after all, could dissolve the rigidity that surrounded them. While enjoying her revamped breakfast, Jean suddenly noticed a message notification. Emily had replied, "Let us go with something bold. How about tamarind and chickpeas?" Jean found herself smiling widely. Bold. It was a choice that reflected a step forward, not just in ingredients, but in daring to take risks in their dynamic. They were on an exciting path to swim in uncertainty together. But as she considered the week ahead, the uncertainty also loomed. Would this exploration unravel deeper truths they both sought to confront, or would it expose weaknesses they weren't ready to face? The question sent a ripple of apprehension through her. The week held more than just recipes. It held the potential for connection or confrontation. Would she transcend her fears, or would the thought of failure push her back into old patterns of retreat? As she prepared to tackle the day, the challenge of vulnerability loomed large, shaping her thoughts like the ingredients in her dishes. This weekly commitment, somehow, felt like a ticking time bomb of growth. One thing was certain. She would need to brace herself for the connection they were about to forge. But the real mystery lingered. Would this journey bring them closer, or expose the fragility that lay beneath their surface? Jean glanced at the clock, realizing time was slipping away. The first step had been taken, but she knew the real challenge awaited just around the corner. Would they sink or swim in their shared exploration of the unknown? The morning air felt electric as Jean found herself staring at the text exchange with Emily. Tamarind and chickpeas echoed in her thoughts, the boldness of the choice invigorating yet daunting. She sensed that this week together in the kitchen would become a delicate tango between her fears and aspirations, each meal a challenge to expose and embrace her truest self. Fueled by coffee and an urge to dive deeper into her personal growth, Jean mapped out the culinary adventure that lay ahead. She envisioned a lesson plan, detailed for each day, as if she were preparing a class. Each recipe would not only teach them about flavors, but also about themselves. The kitchen would transform into a space of vulnerability. Jean opened her cabinets, scanning the assorted spices and seasonings. She felt an odd mix of excitement and anxiety. Their choices were symbolic, echoing her desire to break free from the constraints of perfectionism. The spices represented an array of experiences, just as she hoped to weave a broader narrative with Emily. Each ingredient she pulled out flooded her with memories, some joyful, others shadowy. Cinnamon evoked warmth from childhood baking sessions, while turmeric reminded her of the first time she experimented with cooking authentic Indian dishes. This wasn't just about food. This journey was about rediscovering herself and hopefully inviting Emily to partake in that exploration. As she prepped for the afternoon rendezvous, Jean couldn't shake the impending sense of confrontation that loomed over her. What if Emily wasn't willing to embrace the chaos? What if their differing perspectives pulled them apart instead? An emerging voice in her mind cautioned against the instinct to retreat. Jean took a deep breath and tried to recognize this as an exercise in trust, both in herself and in Emily. This process would require navigating potential conflict, which had been a lingering shadow in their relationship. But wouldn't it be better to confront these issues head-on, rather than to perpetuate a cycle of misunderstanding? When Emily arrived, Jean greeted her with a smile, masking the swirl of emotions brewing beneath. They settled into the kitchen, debating the best way to tackle the chosen ingredients. "What cuisine shall we delve into?" Emily asked, her tone teasing yet sincere. Jean hesitated, realizing they had a choice to make. "Let us do something unexpected," she replied, her voice steadier than her heart felt. "Something that pushes us a fusion dish, perhaps." The suggestion surprised them both, but in that moment, a lightness filled the room, transforming the pressure into a playful sense of possibility. They decided to create a tamarind chickpea salad, incorporating elements from different cultures a way to highlight both their backgrounds and unique perspectives. With the kitchen abuzz with chatter and laughter, they sliced, diced, and seasoned. As Jean demonstrated a new technique she had learned, she could sense Emily's genuine interest, and the barriers that had often defined their past began to erode. Jealousy and resentment seemed to melt away amidst the culinary clutter. Yet, as the aromatic blend began to bloom from the stovetop, a sudden realization washed over Jean. The flavors would symbolize more than just their meal. They would represent courage and the blending of their histories, past grievances steeped in the marinade of the present. Each ingredient they added became a testament to their commitment to this journey. But beneath her emerging confidence lurked an unmistakable fear. Would the laughter dissolve at the first sign of friction? Would exploration lead to acceptance, or would it unveil deeper divisions? As they plated their vibrant dish, a sense of unease struck Jean. She glanced at Emily, who was still engrossed in the moment. The question loomed large. The true recipe for their relationship sat heavy on the horizon. Would they create a masterpiece or determine that they were not yet ready to confront their personal truths? Just as Jean prepared to ask about Emily's feelings on their unfolding dynamic, Emily spoke up, her expression shifting. "There's something I need to tell you." The air thickened with tension, each word about to become a catalyst for change. Would this reveal bring them closer or shatter their delicate bond? Jean felt her heartbeat quicken as Emily's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. This was the tipping point. What would emerge from this moment? She had spent a lifetime painstakingly avoiding confrontation, constructing walls around her emotions. But now, the very foundations were crumbling. "What is it?" Jean asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It almost felt like an incantation, a summon for honesty that could shape their future. Emily took a breath, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth, a clear sign of her own anxiety. "I've been thinking a lot about this week and what it means," she said, her voice wavering. "It's about more than just food for me. It's about us." The duality struck Jean. She wanted to lean in, to embrace this moment, yet a nagging doubt curled in the corner of her mind. Would this be a revelation that created intimacy, or one that ripped them apart once more? Taking a step back mentally, she realized she had a choice to make. Jean could either plunge into the depths of vulnerability and risk, or retreat into her familiar shell. A chain reaction of thoughts raced through her mind. Could she bear the weight of both their fears? Could she confront her own? "I understand," she replied, her tone steadier than she felt. "I've been reflecting on what this week means for me too. I think it's about breaking down walls, not just through cooking, but within ourselves." This wasn't just a culinary lesson. It was a lesson in mutual trust. Emily's expression softened slightly. "I feel like we've been tiptoeing around each other for so long. I want to peel back those layers, but I'm scared. Scared of what we might find." Jean nodded, her heart racing. "Me too. I've always kept things bottled up, hoping the right moment would illuminate everything. But maybe it's the messiness that reveals who we are." As they chopped vegetables and mixed spices, their conversation deepened, unearthing layers of insecurities and aspirations. With each token of honesty, the friction that once anchored their relationship began to transform. When Emily mentioned her feelings of inadequacy at work despite being a capable programmer, Jean felt a flicker of connection. It mirrored her own struggles, her pressing need for validation in her culinary endeavors. "I think we both grapple with wanting to be accepted for who we truly are," she confessed. Their shared revelations punctured the air like the spice they were blending. Every laugh and moment of introspection revealed strands of connection that had been neglected for too long. Jean began to feel the limitations of her past give way to the infinite potential of growth and acceptance. She recalled the act of blending flavors, how one vote of confidence in herself and in Emily could lead to an unexpected explosion of taste. Yet, amidst the dialogue, another wave of doubt washed over her. What if, despite the newfound intimacy, old habits of avoidance resurfaced after their culinary experiment? The prospect of vulnerability stirred something primal within her, the fear of being judged, of facing the raw edges of their relationship. As they finished plating the final dish, a colorful array that showcased their collaboration, Jean felt a tentative hope. But the deeper truths still lay unaddressed, simmering just beneath the surface. An overwhelming urge to breach the final barrier surged through her. Taking a breath, she glanced at Emily, yearning to bridge the final gap. "Are we really ready to face what we've kept hidden? Can we navigate this beyond the kitchen?" she questioned, urgency flowing from her heart to her throat. Emily searched her eyes, the weight of the culinary endeavor shifting into something far more profound. "I don't know, but I want to." In that moment, the realization struck Jean. The world they were building didn't just depend on their culinary fusion. It would require a reckoning. Would they dare to confront the depth of their hidden struggles together? The tension lingered thick between them as they savored their creation. An unspoken promise hovered in the air, both exhilarating and terrifying. Would they rise to the challenge, or would the surfacing of truths carry them into deeper conflict? Jean felt the ground of her emotional landscape shifting under her feet. The next step, a leap into uncharted territory, was inevitable. Would it be a risk worth taking? The dish lay before them, vibrant and full of promise. Yet Jean couldn't shake the sense of impending confrontation. Each colorful layer seemed to represent not just a culinary journey, but the very essence of their relationship. She felt the unsteady ground beneath her, vast and uncharted, daring her to step forward, yet fear tensed her muscles, ready to retreat. "I've been thinking," Jean began, her voice firmer than it felt. She could feel Emily's gaze, steady yet questioning, pushing her toward deeper honesty. "This week within this kitchen, it's been transformative, but the real work is outside. When the knives are put away, who are we without the facade of cooking?" Emily's brow furrowed, and Jean's heart raced. That question felt like a trigger, urging her to explore the unknown. What if we're not just battling our fears of inadequacy at work or within this recipe? What if all this boils down to learning how to be ourselves, to be authentic with each other? A moment of silence expanded between them, thick with unconfessed truths. The air felt tangled, and Jean felt both the weight of her words and the exhilarating pull of vulnerability. "Do you feel that?" Emily asked suddenly, her voice trembling slightly. "Like we're standing on the very edge of something? I want it, but I don't know how to dive into those depths." "You're not alone," Jean reassured her. "In fact, that's the point. We can leap together. The risk isn't just in our individual fears. It's how we navigate these waters side by side." While she sought to comfort, Jean felt the undercurrent of her own trepidation surge. How could she guide Emily when she herself was wrestling with the same doubts? To truly support her friend, Jean would need to confront the anxieties lurking quietly within. "Let us be transparent about our struggles," Jean suggested, taking a deep breath. "I'm not just a chef in here. I often question if I'm good enough. Not just with food, but in my entire career. Every time I plate a dish, I crave that nod of recognition like it's a lifeline. What if that's a mask? What if behind the chef's jacket, I'm just I don't know lost?" Emily's eyes widened, surprise turning to empathy. "I had no idea you carried that weight. I thought you were so confident, unshakable." "It's an illusion, a well-crafted one." Jean scoffed lightly, but the humor hardly masked her insecurities. I'm terrified of being perceived as anything less than competent. And that fear holds me hostage, just like it does for you. Emily's features softened further. This is revealing. We're both stuck, yearning for acceptance, but we've built barriers that are hard to dismantle. In that moment, Jean realized the potential for growth hinged not just on understanding, but on revelation. What if we took this momentum and continued to share? Not just fears, but dreams as well. Let us redefine our narratives together. The moment felt pivotal, a new understanding crystallized. It was about going beyond the kitchen and reshaping their lives. Jean could see that she was not merely sharing her challenges, but also an invitation, a challenge to step out of their respective shadows into a shared light. As the last remnants of light ebbed from the window, she felt the urgency build within again. So many parts of herself had remained locked away for far too long. Are you ready to lay down the masks we've worn? This might be the defining moment we both need. Emily compelled Jean's gaze with fierce sincerity. Yes, but are you truly prepared to see what's beneath? Jean felt the exhilarating thrill of possibility spiraling through her veins. They were about to unearth revelations that could either bind them closer or break them apart. Either way, the promise of transformation loomed above them like a storm cloud, ready to shift their narrative dramatically. The question now lingered. Would they find liberation in their truths, or be swept away by the current of their fears? Jean inhaled deeply, the air thick with anticipation and something else, fear. The kitchen was dimmer now, shadows merging with the fading light as she grappled with the weight of the moment. They were teetering on the edge of an emotional precipice, and she sensed that a single push could send them plunging into a realm of authenticity or, perhaps, ruin. Let me start, Emily said, her voice imbued with newfound resolve. Beyond this kitchen, I sometimes wonder if I've chosen the right path. I love cooking, but there's this gnawing feeling that I might be settling for less than I'm capable of. Jean's heart beat faster. Emily's admission felt like a mirror reflecting her own insecurities. So much of her own fear echoed within Emily's words, uncertainty masked by the heat of the stove, the urgency of service, and the adrenaline of culinary art. Do you think we're hiding behind this work? Jean asked carefully, testing the waters of the conversation. I mean, cooking has become our safe space, but maybe it's also a form of denial? Emily nodded slowly, her expression contemplating the uncharted implications of their discussion. What if we're dodging the bigger questions of our lives? Jean felt an electric pulse of determination. Rather than just discussing their fears, they could carve out a plan, an actionable step into self-discovery. With a swift motion, she grabbed a notepad from a nearby counter and jotted down fears at the top of the page. What are we most afraid of? She asked, looking between the lists they were about to create. Hers might finally reveal a hidden truth. We can confront it, layer by layer. As Emily began to list her fears, failure, disappointing those I care about, the unknown, Jean carefully wrote each word down, feeling a collective weight in the air. It wasn't just about the culinary world. It felt larger. It was about life and aspirations. For every fear Emily voiced, Jean could feel the barriers they had constructed crumbling slightly. When it was Jean's turn to speak, she hesitated, the familiar sting of vulnerability gripping her throat. I fear being irrelevant, just drifting along. I want to be more than just a chef. I want to inspire. Emily's gaze transformed from concern to admiration. That's not just fear, that's ambition. You've got dreams worth sticking around for. But the question is, are you willing to pursue them despite the uncertainty? It was a gut punch, the kind that felt invigorating yet terrifying. Jean looked at the list, and then into Emily's unwavering eyes. I think I am. But what does that look like? I need to strategize. I can't move blindly. A spark ignited within her. What if they not only shared their fears, but also shed light on their dreams? Let us do this together. We can set tangible goals. Let us transform those fears into action plans. The enthusiasm filled the kitchen as they began crafting next steps, network with other chefs, create a personal blog, experiment relentlessly, and take a class in culinary artistry. Ideas flowed, each more exhilarating than the last, drowning out the whispers of self-doubt. But as the night lingered, a shadow of doubt returned. Jean struggled to reconcile her ambitions with the reality of her fears. The nagging feeling of inadequacy tugged at her mind. Were they merely dreaming, or could they actually take these bold steps? A clap of thunder outside reflected her turmoil, a reminder of the storm swirling within. Emily, what if we reach out and find there's nothing there? What if we fail? Her mind whirled with conflicting thoughts. Then we'll learn and adjust, Emily replied steadfastly. But wouldn't it be worse to never try? Let us embrace the struggle together. In that moment, Jean felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were embarking on a journey that could redefine their paths, a true partnership built on truth. As they finalized their plans, a lingering energy of uncertainty electrified the air. Did they have the fortitude to follow through? The challenge had been cast, and while their empowerment surged, the specter of vulnerability loomed larger. The hardest step was yet to come, confronting the past shadows that clung to their ambitions and still threatened to pull them back into the darkness. Would they find the courage to embrace their desired futures, or would trepidation reclaim its hold? Tomorrow would hold the answer, and as Jean glanced at the scattered notes, the question reverberated in her mind: how far were they willing to go to reclaim their authenticity? The next afternoon, Jean stood in a sun-drenched kitchen, a renewed sense of purpose emanating from her as she prepared for another culinary adventure with Emily. They had taken bold steps previously, allowing their vulnerabilities to dance together in the warm embrace of honesty, and now the air felt electric with anticipation. Each ingredient pulled from the pantry symbolized not just a dish, but the aspirations and breakthroughs they had jointly discovered. As she whipped up a vibrant chimichurri sauce, its green hues mirroring the optimism blooming between them, she reflected on the journey they had embarked on. She thought of that timid woman who had arrived at the kitchen just weeks prior, riddled with insecurities and apprehensions. With each cup of parsley chopped, she felt a sense of accomplishment washing over her. She had proven to herself that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. Moments later, Emily entered, a radiant smile playing on her lips. Together, they picked up their knives and turned their anxieties into intentions while slicing fresh vegetables. The narrative of a mother and daughter prohibited by distant hurdles began to morph into a shared vision, a determined alliance with a commitment to fostering deeper connections. "Are we ready to tackle a new venture today?" Emily asked, her tone teasing yet sincere. "Absolutely," Jean responded, her voice steady. "Remember how we talked about our goals? It's time we start taking action." As they prepared a fresh chickpea and tamarind salad, the conversation flowed effortlessly, laden with mutual respect and encouragement. With every bite they savored, the dish represented their triumphs, transforming their culinary fears into palpable achievements. "Mom, I feel like we've really turned a corner," Emily remarked, a glimmer of pride lighting her eyes. "I didn't expect this growth, not just in our cooking, but in our relationship." Jean chuckled lightly, a swell of pride swelling within her. "You're right. All those times I felt stuck in the garden of my grief, it seems I was missing the beauty in the relationships surrounding me, especially ours. It was there, in the kitchen, so filled with laughter and joy, that they uncovered their essence. The layers of intricate flavors began to echo their journey. Offering more than just nourishment, they laid the groundwork for deeper trust and understanding. As they plated their creative masterpiece, Jean felt herself stand taller, more confident than ever before. She had transcended the limitations she'd placed upon herself. The gripping fear of inadequacy faded, replaced by a powerful sense of agency. Her voice had transformed from whispers of doubt into declarations of intent. Hours later, after their meal that felt like a celebration, Jean pulled out her well-worn journal, a companion on this journey. It became a canvas where she could map her ambitions. If she was to rise, to reclaim herself, she needed to orchestrate her next steps toward truly meaningful health and connection. "Let us write down what we envision moving forward," Jean suggested, her pulse racing at the possibilities. "It's not just about cooking. It's about the lives we're cultivating together." Emily nodded, a bright conviction sparking between them. "What do you want most out of this journey?" The question reverberated deeply within Jean, inviting contemplative reflection. "I want to feel alive, to take all the lessons I've learned and weave them into the life I dream of, not just for us, but for everything else." With flowing ink, Jean scribbled her aspirations onto the pages, a clear vision emerging. She was learning to assert herself within her culinary niche, branching out beyond the familiar and safe recipes. The next day, Jean took action. She connected with fellow chefs and culinary influencers. Each interaction was a leap of faith, but she found herself thriving within this world. As she navigated the waters of social media, showcasing her culinary finesse and heartwarming story, the response was overwhelming. She began to receive invites for collaborations and cooking segments, a palpable recognition solidifying her place within the community. By the end of the week, something monumental had shifted. Jean not only embraced her role as a chef, but found herself owning her narrative, a resilient woman unafraid to marry health, food, and heartfelt connections. Her experience shifted from isolation to integrated empowerment. In a final gathering in the kitchen, she and Emily prepared a dish together that marked the culmination of their journey, but also a vibrant beginning. With each step, they reflected on their growth, their partnership knitted tightly with trust and acknowledgement. Every taste was rich with stories, emotions, and the shared laughter that only they could conjure. As they arranged the dinner table, beautiful and warm, adorned with flowers, and the exquisite meal, the weight from earlier days significantly diminished. They had stepped into the unfamiliar territory of vulnerability and emerged with solid confidence. "It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" Emily remarked, glancing around the now vibrant kitchen. "It truly has," Jean replied, returning the stare, a firm resolve in her heart. "And it's only just begun." Reflecting on her extraordinary growth, Jean finally realized that every step of this journey allowed her to reconnect deeply, not just with Emily, but with herself. She had pursued her dreams, allowing courage to eclipse fear and bottled-up emotions to be shared freely. This wasn't merely about cooking anymore. It transcended in ways she had long yearned for. As they sat together, nearly lost in the warmth of connection while savoring their dish, Jean concluded that the real world outside the kitchen, one that had once felt insurmountable, was now a space she could navigate with grace and conviction. The challenges remained, yet they stood firm, hand in hand, confident not only in their cooking but in the life they were inextricably building together. And with a feeling of resolute clarity washing over her, Jean acknowledged the profound metamorphosis had finally taken root. Now, let us share this poignant journey. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and elevate this personal transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. It might just inspire them to embark on their journey of growth.